the equivalent of self-awareness because it is the test for whether or not when you do die, you will in fact be able to steer the magnetism. When you die, you're going to lose about 4 to 10 ounces of weight at that instant. And there will be a magnetic field that has been compressed through the speed of light at the center of your DNA. And the ability to navigate that field, called having a soul, is very simple physics. No religion required. It's simple physics, and it's pure principle, and it's a compression device. And it is the make or break moment for a biological structure. And so at that moment, all the gizmos you bought all your lifetime are not going to help you unless you learn to make your own inner fire. That's one little generalized comment. So I was telling you a little bit about the stories of me, and we got sidetracked delightfully. We were up to our ass in alligators when we remembered our initial intention was to drain the swamp. So after college, I went to be a systems analyst with IBM, where I worked in Detroit, Chicago, and Poughkeepsie. And then a teacher at the IBM training school in Chicago was a Gurdjieff aficionado. And one thing led to the next, and I quit IBM, which is a very un-American thing to do. My mother assumed I went off the deep end and lost it. And I went to, as she put it, study to be a guru in the Gurdjieff School in West Virginia, a place called Claymont.org. And it's a place where we learned the sacred gymnastic, a bliss dance, and we learned the meditations, etc., and the movement and the diet. And I began to have my first intense Kundalini experiences. After that, I had Kundalini experiences which became intense, more and more, you could almost say life-threatening Kundalini, lightening up the tailbone kind of stuff. And fortunately at that time, rather than be diagnosed schizophrenic, which is the American medical way of handling Kundalini, I was fortunate enough to be adopted by Ben Benthoff, the biomedical engineer we talked about, who wrote Stalking the Wild Pendulum, who later called me his guardian angel. And I was adopted by Lee Sanella, MD, the doctor who wrote the book on the medical aspects of Kundalini. That, plus my background in psychophysiology, I realized there was an alternative to be called insane, which was to understand the biological, magnetic nature of human bliss. Subsequently, I traveled and had very intense experiences at the Sea of Galilee and in the Great Pyramid and the Andes. I went to Findhorn with Bucky Fuller and got in a lot of trouble, I guess you could say. And then I returned to my hometown and became an electrical engineer in my father's electric business, and was Sparky the motor whiz and answered 100 phone calls an hour, sometimes about electrical problems, for 10 years. And I invented a line of electrical devices called phase converters for allowing single-phase motors to run on three-phase motors to run on single-phase power. And I began lecturing on nonlinear energy devices. And at that time, we founded the first holistic newspaper of Western New York. We started a Waldorf school, a community called Crystal Hill Farm. And it was a rather colorful time. I then sold the farm, and we started a community in North Carolina called the Circle of Life. It was a geodesic dome designed by Bucky Fuller and installed by John Denver. And we had a community there, and it was very colorful. Could tell stories for hours on that one. And then I was invited to found the first transformational video company in Broomfield, Boulder, Colorado by Jurka Reisevi. And we founded Transicom Gaiam, which today is Explorations Magazine, the largest distributor of transformational video on the planet. And he bought us all the toys that CNN could not afford, and I became a digital video animator. And many things happened. He would invite Hancock, Buval, Temple, Lawler, all those guys, Cutterell. They all used to come to Boulder, and we'd have these gatherings. And at that time, I was invited to speak to the International Flower of Life facilitators in Cave Creek, Arizona. And the day I did that, I received invitations to speak in 10 countries around the world. And I began to wander around the planet, which I've been doing rather too much. And somewhere in there, we also converted 12 children's books to interactive CD-ROM using Flash for Usborne Books, one of the largest publishers of children's books on the planet. And I got my bliss from being an animator. Animus anima, to animate, right? Anyway, during that time, I was supported to develop an invention which was earlier called the HeartLink and is today called the Heart Tuner. And recently, after doing 10 countries in Europe each of the last 3 years, I was invited to consult at this implosion research lab in Netherlands, where they put a PhD biophysicist at my disposal, and together we programmed the current invention, the Heart Tuner, which I'm very happy about. The ability of this device to measure life force is directly related to our conversation about geomancy and feng shui here then. So I'm going to go to the soulinvitation.com/life force article here and just show you briefly how that's measured. So I take a biological capacitive probe, which looks like I guess I left it in the red case. I'll show you on the screen. The biological capacitive probe looks like this. There's an example. I'm taking a hemp fiber dipped in sea salt or sweat into a high impedance probe, and I spectrum analyze. I can also take an inductive probe. The mother, where's the inductive probe? There's the inductive probe. Basically, it's just a coil, okay? And by spectrum analyzing the charge, here I place that probe, see the probe right in the tree there, okay? And I charge amplify the capacitive field of that tree. Here I found a tree that was dying, and I figured out why. The tree was picking up a 74 cycle powerful beat from a huge metal fence that was nearby, that was pointing at the tree. And the geomantic magnetic pollution of that fence was measurably, documentably killing the tree. So we can understand. Whereas here, I have a healthy tree, and the tree responds as Jorn approaches and actually loves the tree. He sent love to that tree. And later we measure the harmonics of the EKG phase lock with this tree. So cohering the tree's capacitance, here's another example. Here's on a cycle. This is a good one. This is when Jan, who was our programmer, went to hug this tree. It was quite real. So this is before and after Jan approached the tree and literally hugged it. This was a good example. We find that people who understand the feeling quality of sacrocranial work, where you feel the long wave component in the spine juice, are better at hugging trees, okay? Because the ability to feel and phase lock with a very long wave is capacitively how you entrain the tree and cohere its field. This is where the tree's electrical field capacitively absorbs or phase locks with that of a person. We believe the physics of tree communication is a charge, capacitive mediated event, because it takes such low wattage to communicate charge over a distance. So you begin to see that geomancy is the discussion of a capacitive link-up between biological structures at one level. Yeah? The question was about, does one plant feel another plant, and can we measure it using capacitor in this way? The transducer that Cleve Baxter used, actually I bought one of his polygraphs once, was basically GSR, galvanic skin resistance, for plants. So he was measuring a change in resistance over time on the leaf surface. And indeed, there was powerful communication in that way emotionally. This transducer, the capacitive probe, we have used more for what I would call higher amperage emotions, and we haven't done much of that work yet. One of the issues we have is this kind of work here with the capacitor is picks up mostly noise if we do it in a room like this. We have to be mostly out in the woods because the charge capacitive field of biological force is so weak that anything with 50 cycle noise in it messes it up. But I do think that's good physics because most bliss and euphoria experiences occur far from power wires for that reason. So we have more work to do.